welcome back on Big Blue Nation and sports fans everywhere, and welcome back to the BBN Report, where we talk all things college football and basketball. And this coming Thursday is Thanksgiving, so you know what that means. Rivalry week in college football and feast week in college basketball. And personally, I think this is one of the best weeks of the entire year for college sports, because, you know, feast week, you get the Maui Invitational, which we'll talk about here in a minute, and the Battle for Atlantis, which we'll also get to. But we also get rivalry week in college football. You get great games like, in my opinion, the best college football rivalry is the Iron Bowl between Alabama and Auburn. You get that this weekend. And unfortunately, with Bo Nix being out for the season, that game isn't going to be as good as what it was looking like a few weeks back. Then you get the Kentucky-Louisville Governor's Cup game. And then you also have the Ohio State-Michigan game, which, of course, anymore that's just turned into the yearly cheek busting for Michigan from its daddy Ohio State at this point. It's getting to the point where Michigan should honestly just start being embarrassed if they can't even come close to getting a win versus Ohio State lately. But that being said, I want to talk about these college basketball tournaments that we have coming up this week. And I think this will be a really good Maui Invitational this year. Now, granted, you don't have like the Gonzagas or the Dukes or the Kansases or the Carolinas that you normally have in here. But you still have a pretty good slate of games to look forward to, and we'll go ahead and we'll jump into that here. You got Game 1, you have Texas A&M versus Wisconsin. Game 2, Butler versus Houston. Game 3, Oregon versus Chaminade. And then Game 4, Saint Marys versus Notre Dame. But on the flip side, you also have the Battle for Atlantis as well. Game 1 being Michigan State versus Sister Jean's Loyola Chicago. Auburn versus UConn in Game 2. Game 3, Syracuse versus VCU. Game 4, Baylor versus Arizona State. Now, me personally, I'm a little bit more excited about the Maui Invitational, so we'll get into the Maui Invitational preview here. In the very first game, you have Texas A&M versus Wisconsin, and I think this is actually going to be a pretty good game in of itself. You have Wisconsin, who's led by Brad Davison, who is averaging 16 points per game and 5.3 rebounds per game. And Stephen Crow with 11 points and 6 rebounds per game. And this is definitely a Wisconsin team who's very safe with the ball here. They're very careful that they don't turn the ball over. They've only turned the ball over on 13% of their possessions on the season so far. But Wisconsin is coming off a loss. They are 2-1 going to be entering this game. They just came off a loss to Providence, which I think is definitely surprising for anybody. But then Notre Dame is also, not Notre Dame, Texas A&M is 3-0, and they are led by transfer sophomore forward Henry Coleman III, who is averaging 12.5 points per game and 5.8 rebounds per game. Tyrese Radford, 11.3 points per game and 6.0 rebounds a game. Marcus Williams, 10.8 points per game, and their return guard Quentin Jackson, who is averaging 10.8 points per game. Overall, I think this will end up being a pretty low-scoring game, but I'm actually going to roll the dice here, and it's kind of a little bit of a surprise, because the last few years, Texas A&M has not been a very good basketball team, but I do think that they are going to get this win here over Wisconsin in Game 1, 65-62. I just think that Texas A&M might be turning a corner a little bit, and Wisconsin coming off that loss to Providence, I think could shake their confidence a little bit. So I'm going to roll with Texas A&M in this. In Game 2, we have Butler versus Houston. It's another matchup I think won't be one of the better matchups of the first 4 games. But you have Houston, who's 3-0, and Butler is 3-1, who's coming off a 20-point loss to Sparty. I'm not exactly sure what the final score is. It's right around 20. But Houston has a lot, both these teams have a lot of senior leadership, with Houston's senior leadership coming from Kyler Edwards at 50. He's averaging 15.3 points per game, 6.3 rebounds a game. Taz Moore, who's 6.3 points per game, 5.0 rebounds a game. Fabian White Jr., 7.0 points per game, 4.7 rebounds per game. But those guys have accounted for a lot of points for Houston so far this year. But the main guy here for Houston, Marcus Sasser, is responsible for 42% of the overall field goals for Houston on the year. He's also averaging 23 points per game, 3.3 rebounds a game, and 4 assists per game. For Butler, who's also, like I said a while ago, is also has senior leadership. They're led by Jared Bolden at 12 points a game. Bryce Nyes, I don't know. It's NZE, I don't know how to pronounce that. 6.3 points per game, 5.5 rebounds. And Ty Gross at 8.7 points per game and 5.0 rebounds per game. Overall, I think that Kyler Edwards and Marcus Sasser are just going to be too much for Butler to overcome in this. I definitely think that those two are just too much for Butler to handle. So overall, I'm going to end up taking Houston to win about 85 to 71-ish. And I think Butler's probably got a little bit, probably going to have a pretty good season, but I think Houston's just going to be too much for them. Now in Game 3, you have Oregon versus the hosting team, Chaminade. No reason to really look too much into this game. Oregon and Will Richardson, Jacob Young, and Eric Williams Jr. are just going to end up rolling over Chaminade in this. It'd probably be about a 40-point win for Oregon. But in Game 4, we got Saint Marys versus Notre Dame. This actually very well, because it's unfortunate this game doesn't come on until 11:30 Tuesday night. But I think this very well could be the best game of the tournament for Maui. Well, at least for the opening 4 games, in my opinion. You got St. Mary's, who's led by seniors Tommy Coos, Logan Johnson, Dan Fatu, and Matthias, not sure his last name, and junior Alex Dukas. While you got Notre Dame's led by grad transfer Paul Atkinson, who is a former Ivy League Player of the Year when he attended Yale. And if I remember right, last year he scored in double figures in like 31 consecutive games or something like that for Yale. Really impressive. And Notre Dame getting him gives them a forward presence and a post presence they did not have last year. A guy who they can throw the ball to and go get a bucket when they need to. Because that guy's going to be huge for Notre Dame this year. Which I will be interested in see how he stacks up against some of the forwards for Kentucky when they meet here in a few weeks in South Bend, Indiana. But this is a game here where you got two teams who like to contrast styles a little bit. Notre Dame wants to get up and down the floor a little bit. They want to play quick, while St. Mary's is very good defensively and they really want to slow the game down a little bit. But overall, my prediction for this, I'm actually going to roll the dice a little bit. I'm actually going to take St. Mary's out of the West Coast Conference to win 75 to 71 in this game. Now we got them previews out of the way there. I personally believe that Oregon and Houston will meet each other in the championship game for Maui, and I think Houston will take that. And if that does happen, that will definitely be a game that I will definitely be looking forward to. I think that will definitely be one of the better games in the non-conference slate for college basketball this year. It'll definitely be a game that I think will end up being high scoring as well if those two teams do end up meeting in the championship game for Maui. Now for the battle for Atlantis, I'm not going to dive too deep into those ones like I did for the Maui Invitational, just because I'm more interested about the Maui Invitational and the battle for Atlantis this year, which normally I have pretty high interest for both of them, but for some reason I just think the Maui looks more intriguing this year. But like I said, in Game 1 you have Michigan State versus Sister Jean. I think Michigan State will roll over Loyola Chicago in that. I think Michigan State is improving. I think Michigan State's going to be one of the better teams in the Big Ten this year, in a very competitive Big Ten, which is, in my opinion, the best conference in college basketball this year. Game 2, I believe Auburn is actually going to beat UConn. And I wouldn't be surprised to see that the other way around. That could also just be me hoping because I despise UConn, but I think that Auburn still has a really good team, and I think that they might be able to run them down the court and really be able to run UConn off the floor a little bit, maybe. Syracuse versus VCU will probably be interesting. I could definitely see that game going either way. Syracuse has been down for a while. VCU, they've been pretty good the last couple of seasons. I actually think VCU will take that. It will end up taking that game. And then in the final game, Baylor versus Arizona State, I believe Baylor will roll over Arizona State. Arizona State's still a little bit down. They're not quite back to where you expect their program to be. But Baylor has a very good team coming off winning the national championship, if I could talk. And I just overall think I think Baylor will ultimately end up winning this battle for Atlantis as well. But it'll definitely be a really good weekend of college basketball. It's been about enough of me. This has been a college basketball feast week preview. Comment down below and tell me who you guys think are going to end up winning these two tournaments. Comment down below if you think I'm insane on some of my picks and you think that I got them wrong. Tell me what you think. Drop a like on this video because a little love does go a long way. Subscribe for more college football and basketball videos. And I'll go ahead and I'll catch you guys in the next one.